Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Maiden Edition of the NGP UK webinar series. Our topic today is GP Partnership, the discussion. So what we'll be doing is we'll be digging deep and sinking our teeth into the nitty gritty of the GP partnership model, having a look at the partnership portfolio through the eyes of experienced and distinguished Nigerian GP partners. We will try to tease out your ideas about the GP partnership model, identify your concerns, and hopefully meet your expectations at the end of the day. I am your moderator, Dr. Harrison Offiong. I am a locum GP myself, and so I'm really interested in hearing what the speakers say and wondering if I'll be convinced to switch to becoming a GP partner at the end of the day. So that's my first challenge for the speakers, to convince me to become a GP partner at the end of this talk. But before we start, let's go through some housekeeping. So only one speaker or only one person speaks at a time. So if you're not chosen by the moderator to speak, keep your microphone on mute. During the question and answer session, you can raise your hand and the host or moderator, myself, would pick you to speak. If you prefer not to speak, you can send your questions via the chat box. And if time permits, the moderator will ask on your behalf. But if I need to ask a question for you, we'll need to work out how you're going to pay me for that job. Okay? There's no fire alarm test today. So if your fire alarm goes off, please follow the protocol in your own house. And before we start, can you all check that your ovens and cookers are all switched off? Okay? Make sure you register to ensure that you receive your CPD certificate at the end of the day. You can do that by going to the NGP UK website and scroll down to events. After the webinar, you would also receive a feedback survey. Please complete it so that the speakers can get your feedback. In the meantime, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. As an outline for the day, we will have a short presentation by the organizer, and then we'll take the first two speakers back to back. We'll have a brief interlude where we have a question and answer session before introducing the third and fourth speakers. And if time allows, we would have, during the last question and answer session, we will hear from a new GP partner, Dr. Ayo. But first up, we have the chief organizer of today's webinar. The reason we are all here, our very own NGP UK member, Dr. Ada Eze Uzo Okonkwo, whose survey identified the doctor's educational need for this discussion on GP partnership. So I would temporarily hand over the reins to her to briefly share with us the results of her survey. Okay.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
All right. My name is Sudaz. It was while talking with a few of the people who helped us organize it, like Ijema and Wenger and Harrison, that were able to come up with this program. Obviously, the idea of having this webinar came from a personal need of mine, but I'm happy that every other person felt that they required the same kind of education as well. Initially, I started with a survey just to kind of get the ideas of everybody to see whether this is something that we could do as a first seminar, and everybody was happy with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and share a quick screen of the outcome of the survey so that we kind of get a brief understanding of what exactly the survey came about. So let me find that and share. Okay, so this is the first slide. When I did the survey, there were quite a few questions, just about as much as the Survey Monkey allowed me to, but this is one of the first slides. I picked just 3 because I have just about 5 minutes to talk here. The question here was, if you are not a GP partner, given the right circumstances and education, will you be happy to become a GP partner? As you can see, 70% of the respondents came back with a yes. Now, altogether, the total number of people that responded generally were up to about 50 to 60. I think it was about 60 because some of them came in late, but generally it said that there was a need for, my internet unstable, there was a need for given the right circumstances that people want to become GP partners. Now, the key word, as I've put up here, is right circumstances. And obviously one of the key circumstances is the pay. Pay is a very, very big factor. So I'm hoping that one of our able speakers will be able to convince us the reason why we should go ahead to do that. And obviously one of the speakers that I had a chat with, one of the things that he said that caught my mind was that he's not here to tell us that partnership is the best option, but basically to discuss if it is a better option for you as a person, which I found that as an interesting point of view, really. The other slides, I'm hoping the slide thing is still showing.
Yes, it is.
The question is whether you felt there was a need to educate more GPs about the importance of GP partnership model. As you can see, that was a 99% yes. And this is a feedback from both partners salaried out of hours. Everybody else was saying yes. And I felt that RCGP as a school, I just the finished GP training in the past 2 years, and I know that the GP partnership model was not talked about, or if they talked about it, I wasn't there, but I like to believe I attended all my sessions and it wasn't talked about. So I came out of GP school feeling that locum was the way for me, because my friends and my immediate circle were all locums. So being that I might want to go into partnership, I'm now struggling to find people outside my circle to be able to ask, you know, give me a bit of this information, give me a bit of that information. And I understand that GP partnership model is a lot, so you just don't jump into it without the question. So I'm also hoping that one of the speakers will be able to tell us whether NGP UK can fill this role in terms of educating young GPs about the model. So if the RCGP is not doing that, is this something that we can do to help ourselves and also take it from there? So that should be a question that hopefully Harrison is keeping note of. The other slide quickly is, do you think the GP partnership model is, in this current climate, is it sustainable? Now, it was a varied answer. The yellow screen here, the yellow chat here says, I do not know. And I'm assuming this is a mixture of everybody that responded to this, meaning that amongst us GPs, we do not know where exactly this model is going to. But my point of view is, if you don't even know what GP partnership model is all about, how can you answer whether it will be there in the next 10 years, whether it's, so there is a lot of information, bad conceptions, misconceptions that are there. So yes, so quite a few questions I've generated. Harrison, hopefully we will not have lack of questions for this session. But basically, based on this survey, that is what led to us organizing this and being able to educate ourselves. And I want to obviously give a big thanks to Harrison, Wenger, Quincy, you've been marvelous. Margaret, Henry, Oge, you guys have been very upcoming. Even Onyinye, I'm sure you're here, you're listening. They've kind of, you know, very much, we are here to help you with this. So that's me done, and I hope we all learn a lot to help us make informed decisions going forwards. Thank you very much. So let me stop share.
Okay, thank you very much for that survey results. Thanks for organizing this. I mean, you raised some brilliant points there. You know, 99% say yes to the need to educate us on GP partnership. So it seems that most of us have come in from a Nigerian perspective. We've come into GP without really knowing much about GP partnership, and we have decided to take the alternate or more popular route of going down the locum way. So I think Following up from that, we need to jump into it. We'll go to our first speaker. So Dr. Henry Akintunde has been a GP partner for about 7 years. He's one of six partners in a town practice of about 12,000 patients. He has a professional interest in medical education, and he's a primary care TPD, an examiner for RCGP, and a general practice tutor for medical colleges in the universities of Oxford, Leicester, and Warwick. He's also the author of Smart Tips for Success, Become a Better Version of You. As you can see, his loaded portfolio, I think his talk would also be loaded with information, and he'll be talking to us today about the basics of GP partnership, GP contracts, partnership models, GP forward view, etc. So please listen attentively, and if you have any questions, get ready to ask them after the second speaker or submit them in the chat box. So Dr. Akintunde, I'm going to unmute you and hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harrison, and thank you, Ada. It's a pleasure to be here today in the company of other speakers to just contribute my thoughts to this discussion on partnership. So today I've got 15 minutes to just go through the basics, and hopefully we can all build on that. And during the question and answer session, we might be able to drill down to the nitty gritty of what people want to learn about the partnership. So essentially, I'm just going to do that. Thank you. So GP partnership. I actually found out that there is what is already called the Partnership Act, and it's been in existence since 1890. And there's a formal definition for a partnership there. Relationship which exists between persons carrying on a business in common with a view of profit. So from that premise, there's always been the question, are you first doctors or business owner as a partner? I think fundamentally, going by the definition of partnership, the business seems to be the first common point. That's what brings you guys together. And obviously, you know that not all partners are doctors. So I will think that the business takes precedence over the professional bit. Now, it doesn't mean that we will undervalue the professional bit, but when it comes to partnership, the business is very important. And general practices as a whole are of varying sizes. I've known general practices that are of about 5,000, 7,000 patient population, and I've known others that are as large as 40,000, 60,000. So varying sizes. But the common thing is that the services, their services are contracted by NHS commissioners to be able to provide general medical care to a particular population in a geographical area. So the NHS commissioner have a contract with general practices and say, would you be responsible for providing general care for our patients in this particular defined area? Now, for it to be a GP type partnership, I forgot to mention that the Partnership Act, GP partnership is not only restricted to general practice. We know in law, their solicitors can have a firm of partners, accountants have partners. So GP partnership is one of such partnership. But the critical thing about GP partnership is that at least one of the partners in a GP partnership must be a GP. Now, all the others don't have to be GP. They can be other health professionals like nurses. In some practices, practice managers are part of the partners in a practice. But in most instances, GP partnerships comprise mostly GPs. And the arrangement is such that the GPs are the business owners, they run the business, but they also provide clinical services, and they agree to share profit based on a predetermined arrangement which is usually stipulated in the partnership agreement. We will be hearing more about the partnership agreement later by one of the other speakers. But the common way, particularly in partnerships where it comprises only GPs, is that you share the profit based on the number of sessions you do. So if there were, say, 4 partners who do 8 sessions, and there are 2 other partners who do 6 sessions each, so that would be about 44 sessions. So at the end of the day, all of the profits will be divided by 44 sessions, and each partner goes home with that corresponds to the number of sessions that they do. So that's sort of like the basic in terms of the definition of what a GP partnership is. So the GP contract, I think the first starting point is understanding that as GPs or GP partners, we are not employees of the NHS. So although the population of the UK see us as such, technically and in reality, we are not. And this is where the difference begins, where GP partnership is different from hospital consultants. So we are independent contractors to the NHS. And those 2 words are important. Independent because the way we run our businesses is not determined. No one determines that for us. It's up to the partners to determine how they run their business to be able to achieve a profit and meet the stipulations of the contract. But wherever there are contractors, there has to be a contract. And these contracts are sort of the critical thing that also differentiate GP partnership from other forms of partnership. The contracts are held between the CCGs on behalf of NHS England. Now, most CCGs in the United Kingdom are now fully delegated. Only a few are still partially delegated. That means that they can now commission primary care on behalf of NHS England without NHS England being involved. Those that are partially delegated means it's sort of a joint commission of primary care along with NHS England. But so CCGs are the primary holders and they do it on behalf of NHS England, have that contract with practices. The contracts can also be with single-handed GPs or what is called the single partner GP, which is kind of an oxymoron because there's no partnership if you're the single person, but it's more like single-handed GPs. I wouldn't go too much into that model. There are still a few around. Where I work, there's been a single-handed GP for a very long time, but very recently it's taken on 2 partners, I think because it's coming towards retirement. Generally speaking, the thought, I don't know how to validate this, is that they tend to be more profitable. And I can see how that would be if you're mostly getting other people to do the clinical work and you're keeping most of the profits. But I think they are not that sustainable because there's just so much to do in a partnership that it's very difficult for me to see how one person could do it. So it's not something upfront that I will advise anyone to really think about going into. But there are limited companies also that are also contracted to provide healthcare to a particular population. So any of these 3 could hold contracts for the CCG. And in the contracts, there are mandatory requirements and services that need to be provided as part of primary care. But there are also optional services that partnerships can choose to provide if they so desire. Now, in terms of partnership models, the contract is what sort of drives the type of model. And based on the contract, there's the General Medical Service or GMS. The General Medical Service is basically a national standard contract. So every year, the General Practice Committee of the British Medical Association will negotiate a contract with NHS England to be able to then apply at the local level. Now, more or less, in reality, is more like an update every year. The real big change in terms of the GMS contract was in 2004. And so every year, a little bit is added, a little bit is taken out. That's sort of what's really been happening since then. But every year, the contract is agreed, and that is then applied locally. So each CCG will then ensure that they can then hold that contract based on the nationally agreed contract with their local practices. And as at 2018-2019, 70% of practices were operating under this contract. So the vast majority of practices in the UK are under the GMS practice model. There's also the PMS, which is personal medical services. This is a type of contract that is negotiated and agreed locally. Now, so much of what will be in the contract will still mirror what is in the GMS. However, it gives CCG the flexibility to be able to get practices to do other things that meet the needs of the local population, such things that would not have been in the general medical services contract. Now, this came into being. Most practices started applying to become PMS practices around 1998. But about 2014, a review started. Historically, PMS practices were better paid than GMS practices because in addition to the core GMS contract, PMS practices had what was called an MPIG, minimum practice income guarantee, that was paid on top of that to help them meet the locally agreed contract. So over time, the NHS felt that many PMS practices were not doing so much different from GMS practices, but were earning substantially more. And the review then started, and three things happened. Either practices proved that they were PMS practice and retained that status, or switched to a GMS practice straight away. I applied to become a GMS practice, so either they switched or they applied to become, they stayed as PMS practice or switched to become a GMS practice. But the beauty of PMS practice is that they had the flexibility to tailor requirements to local needs. So it's not something that is gone completely. About 26% of practices in the UK are still PMS practice. Now, the other model is the more rare type of model, which is the APMS, the Alternative Provider Medical Service. This is the one that then allows non-medical personnel to be able to hold contracts. So limited liability companies to be able to provide services to a population in a particular area. But it also allows, for example, medical professionals to be able to provide healthcare, primary care to peculiar populations, like populations of the homeless, for example, or asylum seekers. The GMS and PMS doesn't cover that often. So the APMS offers even more flexibility, and very few practices, very few contract holders fall within that remit. If you see, that's about 96%, so it just leaves about 4% for other types of models. So what are the, since we are primarily contractors, I think it's important to understand what's in the contract, because that's sort of what defines what we do, really. In the GP contract, there's an agreement on the population that your practice will be covering and providing healthcare need for. There's agreement about registration processes. There are discussions about you maintaining that list of patients and under what circumstances a patient might be removed from your list. It also talks about establishing what is the essential medical services that the practice must provide to its patients. And I'll talk about this a little bit more shortly. And It sets standards for premises, for workforce requirements, for under what conditions inspections will happen, and what sort of oversight needs to be provided. It sets out expectation for how you should involve the public and how you should get your patients involved. And it would outline key policies in areas such as indemnity, how to deal with complaints, liability, insurance, the need to have insurance in place, clinical governance, and under what conditions the contract could be terminated. Now, based on the contract, there are five types of services that GP practices provide. So there's essential services. The essential service is the core service that a GP practice provides. And this is the one you provide, that GP practices provide between their working hours of 8 a.m. and 6:30, such as diagnosis and management of illnesses, health promotion, referrals to other care providers like secondary care providers. All of these fall under the essential services, and these are the mandatory aspects of the contract. There's also the out-of-hours service. So in the contract, the default position is that a GP practice or GP practices are responsible for providing even out-of-hours care for their patient population, but they are then given the option to opt out. And this was one of the big changes that came with the 2004 contract, that practices could opt out of providing out-of-hours care. And this is what the majority of practices do. As a matter of fact, I don't know any practice that doesn't opt out of out-of-hours care. Now, where the practices then opt out of out-of-hours care, the CCG needs to find a provider to be able to provide out-of-hours care for that particular population. So by opting out, you are also losing some money, but I would think that for what it's worth, it's not too much money to opt out of. Additional services are services that again are assumed that contract holders will provide, but they don't have to. Again, they can opt out of this. So they include things like cervical screening, minor surgeries. These are additional services. Again, most surgeries provide this because at the end of the day, it's business, remember? As many things as you can do, and the NHS has been so smart to just break the money into small bits. You take on many of those things and provide them. And in general, it also helps your patient satisfaction if they don't have to go to too many places, since your practice can provide that. Now, enhanced services are mostly nationally agreed bits of the contract that again, contract holders can choose to provide, but oftentimes again, most providers will choose to provide that. And sometimes they can be divided into the direct enhanced ones, which are the nationally negotiated ones as part of the annual contract that the BMA negotiates, or they can be local enhanced service where your CCG finds a need and comes up with something that individual practices can subscribe to being part of and get paid for that. So for this year, for example, doing a health check for people with learning disability is an enhanced service. Certain types of vaccination other than the basic childhood vaccination types and flu, immunization, pneumococcal, other than those sort of standard vaccinations are also under the enhanced services. And then there's locally commissioned services that can take any form as far as it's something that the CCG comes up with to meet a need. And this can vary from year to year. So there will be times that your local CCG will say, we want to run this pilot and we will pay you for this if you're part of it. And you can subscribe for that. And that just runs for a specific time period and doesn't go beyond that. Now, is the GP partnership model sustainable? My answer is absolutely. I believe that the GP partnership model is sustainable. And the reason I believe this to be the case is that GP practices are the most efficient arm of the NHS financially because they are run by business owners. Now, in many other arms of the NHS, you can always talk about where you can find savings. But in GP, because it's primarily run by business owners who, as with all other businesses, are interested in increasing income, reducing expenditure to increase their profit, it makes it very efficient. And that's the only way that people in primary care, it's estimated that we have our patient contacts of between our patient contacts that take place in the NHS, about 87 to 90% of them occur in primary care. Yet in primary care, we have less than 10% of the budget. As at 2018-2019, it was 7.1% of the budget. Now, I don't think the government can come up with any other model where it's cheaper. Plus, in partnership, because it's your business, you do, only God knows how many hours you give into it that you're not paid for. So I really can't think of any other model that any government can come up with that will still ensure that the level of care that is provided right now is provided and yet will not cost anything more. There have been talks from the days of Andrew Lansley about NHS wanting to be privatized and all of that. If anything, what we are seeing, there are lots of talks about Tory government wanting to. Now, I don't know whether they truly want to or not, but what we are seeing in reality is that they are committing funds to try to ensure that the GP partnership model survives. Because I believe that somewhere in their mind, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, they know that they are getting primary care at a bargain. Somebody did a calculation and came up with a figure that for every 10-minute consultation in general practice, it only brings a profit of £5 to a GP partner that sees a patient. So if you think about that, in 1 hour, you really are making £30 from seeing the patient. Now, that's more than what I would pay my handyman to come and work for me. So I believe for that reason, the partnership model is definitely sustainable. When I was coming into partnership, it was about the time that federations were coming in and all of that. I don't know how it felt in other areas, but the talk where I was like, oh, we need to come together to form big organizations so that companies like Virgin and all that will not take away the job from us. Now, I was quite naive at that point. I was just coming into partnership. But the longer I've stayed in partnership, Virgin couldn't possibly take over primary care in the UK. I don't see how they are going to be able to do it and still make profit. But I believe some modifications may likely be made to the current model, but it may happen over time. Some of the modifications may be that what currently exists as primary care networks may ultimately then become GPs. It would become smaller practices coming together to form bigger practices to make it more sustainable. But I really don't see the partnership model going anywhere. Now, why become a partner? I'm not going to go too much into details of this because I think Oge is covering this, but this is just from my point of view. Like Adeza said at the beginning, I'm not here to say this model is the best thing for anyone, but I certainly believe that particularly for us as Nigerian GPs, we need more of us to be involved in GP partnership. And these are the reasons from my point of view why I believe more of us need to be involved. And what sort of person should be thinking about a partnership? If you're the kind of person that likes the idea of owning your own business, to be a business owner, I particularly like the idea that I'm working with other people on something that is our own. We can shape it how we want. We can be strategic about where we want to take it to. I like that idea. If you are looking for a platform that enables you to be creative and to be innovative, then I think partnership comes for you. When I just joined partnership, my practice at that time was not having medical students. The partners that I met had medical students before, and they kind of found it too stressful. And I was passionate about teaching. I wanted to carve a niche for myself in medical education, and there was an opportunity to take medical students from one of the universities. I somehow managed to convince my partners that I could come up with something that would not be too stressful on all of us as a whole, as a practice. And I sort of came up with a strategy that fitted into the system we already had in place for supervising registrars in such a way that whoever was supervising registrars, because one person for every surgery takes responsibility for supervising registrars in my practice. And so just fitted that in and everybody liked it. And it's now almost 7 years down the line. We've kept having medical students. In fact, we now have medical students from 2 other universities. So a very good opportunity to apply your creativity and innovation. Synergy, bringing together your effort and those of other people to produce something better than what you would have the sum of what you would have all individually produced. If you like flexibility, control, and certainty, I like, wherever possible, I like to be involved in the discussion that concerns me. And this is one of the things I like about partnership. Is my time up, is it? Okay, I'll round up now. I like that idea. Flexibility and certainty. I like to know what I'll be doing this time next year. Partnership provides me that opportunity. Career progression. There's always the opportunity to go down different pathways as a partner. And this information comes to you without necessarily going out to ask for it. I think if you were a locum, you would need to make a lot of effort to get much of this information. Good income, I'll leave that to Quincy to discuss that better. Now, but more importantly, this is the one that I'm really passionate about, is opportunity for influence. There are so many things we talk about not being, that affect us as international medical graduates in particular, or people that belong to the Black and minority ethnic group. Now, if you are not on the table, you don't have a say. I think that's just the brief summary of that. And partnership in many instances provides you the opportunity to be on the table. Now, there are some bits that, for example, medical education, it will be very difficult to be involved in that as a locum at the level of GP registrars, program directors, and all of that. As the days I was talking about, oh, this thing was not taught when I was a trainee, I thought actually that's partly the responsibility of the program directors to have added that to your half-day releases or whole-day releases. But if you're not on the table, you can't make that influence. And right now is the best time for you to become a partner if you're thinking of becoming one. 20,000 golden handshake for coming into partnership. I think that's another good reason. So I'm going to stop now. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we can't hear the handshakes because everybody's muted, but I'll clap on behalf of everybody. Henry, thank you so much for that passionate and packed session. I mean, there was so much information coming at me from all angles. I know we gave you a Herculean task to compress it into 15 minutes. We may have gone over a little bit, but I mean, that's the life of a GP. You never do anything in 10 minutes during the consultations. I think just as a summary, the key things you mentioned that you don't have to be a GP to be a GP partner. It's something that we can explore a bit more. You mentioned something about profit sharing based on the number of sessions you do. So the return is based on how much you put in. You talked a lot about single-handed GP partnerships and how it's being phased out with so much to do. Is it sustainable? PMS, GMS contracts, different types of services. And then you also said something about you put in so much hours that you don't get paid for. So that's interesting, and it sort of links into our next speaker. We would have the second speaker, and then we would address the questions. So please ask the questions as keep your questions ready from the first speaker, and we will address them after the second speaker finishes. Also, I've noticed something going on where all the other speakers are answering some questions in the chat box. So if you have questions, we can answer them on the go. Just put it in the chat box, and our speakers and other GP partners that are here with us would be able to provide answers. So moving on to the second speaker, we have Dr. Margaret Ikor, a GP partner at Holderness Medical Practice. She is an Associate Director of Primary Care for Health and York Medical School. She's the current Faculty Chair for HOMBA and Rignings and a Fellow of the RCGP. She is one of the co-champions for the Yorkshire and Humber Clinical Research Networks for AITs and First 5 GPs. She has a keen interest in research and is currently facilitating several COVID-19 trials within her own practice. I mean, she obviously has her hands full, so there's a way she's doing it. You know, she's managing to achieve work-life balance, and that's what she's going to talk to us about. She will talk us through how to manage workload, family, balancing pressure from external influences like RCGP, LMC, CQC, NHS England, etc. So, Dr. Iko, over to you.
Thank you very much, Harrison. And thank you also, Ada, for setting this up. It's been amazing. And thank you, NGP UK, for allowing me to talk about the partnership on this platform. So I think I've been tasked with the slightly easier bit in terms of I'm just going to talk about managing work-life balance with the family and how I juggle admin with my clinical work, and a little something on GPs with specialist interests, and really just touch very briefly, conscious of time, on the various stakeholders that we engage in the community. And I think the easiest way for me to actually talk about all this is actually just talk about myself. So when I came off the scheme of VTS 15 years ago, I stayed as a registrar in the practice where I was an ST3 as a salary GP, which suited me really well at the time because I had just bought a house, had a young family, and to be fair, the responsibility of partnership did seem rather overwhelming, and I didn't actually understand a lot about what it entailed. And also the other fact was a lot of the partnership meetings were in the evenings. So with a young family, and I've married a medic, which has its advantages and disadvantages, but being the more flexible of the two, it was easier for me to stay as a salary GP. And then I moved to East Yorkshire, so I'm now based in an area called Hull. And within 3 months of being salaried there, I was offered a partnership. Now, originally we were about 9 partners in that partnership, and the average retirement age was around 52 years of age, which I feel quite young to retire, but hey ho. But very soon it became, because we're quite underdoctored in this area, when we got down to about 6 partners, I think Ogie or someone's going to be talking about the last man standing situation, we started to become very twitchy, because we were all, some of the junior partners still had a financial responsibility in terms of the loan they'd taken out to buy in. And we just didn't know how we were going to manage the clinical workload and the business with such few partners. We had 12,000 patients at the time. But we were fortunate because in our area called Holderness, there were 2 other practices with exactly the same demographic as ours. So 2 years ago, we merged. When I joined as a partner, I had to buy in originally to the premises, which was quite a significant commitment at the time. And this was 10 years ago. So I was looking at, I'll tell you the figures, it was about 100 grand to buy in. I had to take out a loan. But in all honesty, it has been probably one of, for me personally, as Henry's alluded to, it's not the best option for everyone, but for me, it's been the best financial decision I think I've made ever. At the time we had to, there was something called parity. So parity, it's not so common now, but back then, say if you had a 4-partner practice and they were all full-time, and say they were all taking £100,000 home a year, when you got to parity, and initially I was on 50% for 6 months, and then that accrued, and then I got to full parity at 2 years, you'd be taking home that similar salary in 2 years' time. Nowadays, it's very different. So our incoming partners, and I won't touch too much on this because I'm conscious that someone else is talking about this. Our current partners actually essentially buy into a loan, and there are various models now. So the financial responsibilities aren't as onerous as they were previously. We're also a dispensing practice, which again, I was a bit naive in terms of what dispensing practices were. Essentially a dispensing practice, are slightly more profitable than your normal practice because you take on responsibility of providing the medication to patients in rural areas where they don't have a chemist. And I think in total, I think dispensing practices dispense to about 9 million patients UK-wide. So initially, when I started, I was on 9 sessions, and back then 9 sessions was regarded as full-time. Now I understand 8 sessions is regarded as full-time, but pretty much with all the other stuff that I'm doing, because we're also a training practice, within a year I was encouraged to become a trainer. I said, well, I had a very good experience as a trainee myself, so I became a trainer. Now, it does look like I do a lot looking at that list, but in fact, when I started appraising 5 years ago, I do the absolute minimum, which was 5 a year at the time, so it's not that onerous. And for 2 sessions a week, I also do a lot of stuff with our local medical school in Hull and York. So I'm essentially the go-between practices and the medical school in terms of teaching and training our students in primary care. And 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, essentially, I decided that I wanted to get a bit more involved in what we did as a locality, because I felt it was important, because there was not much representation in terms of Black GPs in positions. So I turned up to a faculty board meeting, and then 2 years later down the line, I somehow ended up being the chair, which I've found quite interesting, quite challenging, but overall very, very rewarding. So the biggest challenge for me as a woman, as a mother, was the flexibility, because when I started, there was a great deal of inflexibility. You know, you were told that your surgery's finished at 6, and you know, goodness, what do you do when you've got kids to pick up and the nursery closes at 6? I can't be in 2 places at the same time. So at the time, I look back and I laugh. I actually started up a childcare company with a retired teacher. It was predominantly used by people who worked in the NHS, because we gave the extended hours to about 8 o'clock. So there would be the care element for the children, and also the teaching element that the teacher was able to provide. So by the time you picked up the children, they had done all their homework and they were rested, and it was easier to have an interaction with them at the end of the day. And even though I'm no longer one of the directors for that company, it's still going strong and it's become very popular. Of course, nowadays, being a partner has allowed me to encourage my partners to adopt better flexible working patterns for our staff. So men and women, if they need to finish at 4 or 5, then so be it. Because I think if you treat your staff well, we're not, you know, our children are not going to stay young forever. At some point, when they want to take on more responsibility, there are our future partners. So I'm really keen on that. And I know some local practices are also having these term time contracts. So where partners or salary GPs just work term time only. So essentially they've got all the holidays off with the children. So one of the benefits for me as a partner has been able to actually innovate and create our own paths in terms of how we work. And that's been really, really a strong feature for me. So a few years ago, I mean, we all have this move towards being paper light. And one of the main tips my trainers told me was, when you finish, you will be inundated with paper in terms of hospital letters, reports, insurance company things. Once you touch that piece of paper, deal with it and file it, because if you don't, you'll end up with a whole heap of letters at the end of the week, and it can become quite challenging. But now it's very different in that we have a team, and we call them the Korma team. They're essentially our communications team, where we've got some funding from Health Education England to train somebody up to deal with all, it's a team essentially, there's 4 of them that deal with all our hospital letters. So I must, you know, if a letter comes in that needs actioning from, say, medication changes, that goes towards our pharmacist, or if something needs to be followed up, they will do that. So there's very, very little in terms of actual paper that I deal with on a week-to-week basis. We also have buddies, which is quite common. So we tend to buddy up with a partner who's on similar sessions to us. So we cover each other when the other person's on leave. And we have a very good finance manager, because now we've got 36,000 patients. We've had to have a senior management team. We actually have a CEO, which I'm trying to get our head around. But it's been quite imperative to the needs of the business. One tip is, and again, I'm sure this will be mentioned, is to consider your tax and your national insurance contributions. There was a story that I was told by my former trainer. He didn't realize that he wasn't taxed at source. So he just spent his drawing, because you get a drawing, it's not a salary, And he spent all this money, and at the end of the year was told that he had to cough up 30 grand for his tax. And he was just completely bereft because he didn't realize that someone wasn't taking away the tax. So things like that you need to consider. I've got a PA, so I've got someone, that's another thing that we're bringing into the system now. So she's really helped me manage my time a lot better. And then definitely in terms of workload, it's helped me significantly. And unfortunately now, COVID has forced us all to embrace remote working a lot better. So we don't have to worry if you can't make it into the surgery because of commitments at home. We've all got laptops now. So I am actually doing 2 or 3 sessions a week now from home. And I always say to people, even as salary GPs, wherever you can, you must learn the art of delegation. So moving on very quickly, GPs with specialist interests is actually now a slightly redundant term. We call them GPs with extended roles. And they can, you'll know people who have ENT interests, gastric, cardiology. There's a whole raft of GPs with extended roles now. If you go to the college, not that I'm plugging the college or anything, but there is a framework. It's not, there's some accreditation for the dermatology and I think the minor ops field, but every other specialty, it's not particularly clear at the moment. Prior to the advent of CCGs, we had something called primary care trusts, PCTs, and they had better frameworks at the time for GPs with specialist interests. But since they dissolved in, I think, 2013, it's not been very clear as to how that accreditation happens for anything outside of dermatology or minor ops. So I would encourage people, if there is something that you can do, and for me it was research. So 10 years ago, if anyone said to me, you're going to be involved in research, I would laugh because I couldn't think of anything more boring. But if you think about it, in primary care, we see 90% of first patient contact happens in general practice. But the research, 90% of research in the NHS happens within the secondary care. So I responded to an advert and in the hospital to look at something called an ELF test for liver cirrhosis. We did a small study. I realized the impact it had on our patients. And from there, we've just built on year to the point where it has really provided substantial income for the practice, particularly the COVID trials that we've been doing, where I'm conscious that people hadn't had access to testing early on because we were already part of a research network. We were able to go into our care homes early. So it's about just finding your niche in the practice, because that'd be quite useful. So stakeholders, there are many, as you're aware. That I think Henry's already touched on the clinical commissioning groups, who essentially we hold contracts with to deliver certain services to our population. The college is there in terms of predominantly, I guess, education. It's a membership organisation. I know Ada touched on the curriculum and how there is an absence of GP partnerships within the curriculum, but that's something that I think we can address with the college, and I think will be addressed. Locally, we always have a session for our SD3s that are outgoing in terms of what we do as a part, what the difference is in different partnerships. And you can do that as a trainer, even with your trainees as well. LMCs, so some of my partners are on the local medical committees, who are statutory bodies, who represent the voices of general practitioners from anything to occupational health, well-being or education, and primary care networks. So these are the new guys in town. So essentially, unfortunately for them, COVID, I think, has put a pause on a lot of the activity. But if you have, it's practices that come together with a minimum list size, I think, of 30,000. So fortunately for us, we are our own PCN, so it's easier for our practice to get things done together. So there are certain challenges, but also opportunities for networks to come together and instigate care for their patients. For example, COVID was a real catalyst, I think, in terms of PCNs establishing things like hot hubs, for example. They came together very quickly to try and work out how we were going to deliver care to patients in the midst of this ongoing pandemic. And of course, the most important stakeholders for me in terms of what I've been doing for research has been my patients, really, have been quite profound. in enabling me to do what I want to do. So I've just a few top tips, because I know this is already going to be covered. Do your research. You know, a partnership is like a marriage, if you think about it. You spend, or I've spent, I think, more time with my partners at work at the moment than I do at home. You know, has anybody left the partnership recently? If so, why? If it's through retirement, fine, but you know, find out those reasons. Don't just dive straight in. If you're offered a salary position with due to membership, check the accounts very quickly. Always go through I'll finish in 60 seconds. I had a friend of mine who joined a partnership, didn't read the accounts, and ended up with £500 a month because she didn't realize that the profit share was shared across everyone from the cleaner to the secretaries. So it's a true story. So make sure you check the accounts and read the partnership agreement. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness, thank you very much. I'm sure you can hear me clapping on behalf of everybody. Since I've put everyone on mute, I have the power to do that. Thanks so much, Margaret, for that really, really passionate presentation. I mean, you seem to have like 12 hands because you're doing quite a lot, you know. But I think from
I delegate a lot. I delegate a lot, Harrison.
Well, but from what you said from your presentation, you're obviously a problem solver, you know. So it was impressive that you started up a care company because you had that problem there, you know. So I think it throws light on looking at things from a different perspective. So rather than running away from being a GP partner because of childcare, you actually dug in there and came up with a solution for it instead, you know. I think the other things you mentioned, things about putting in quite a lot of money, taking a loan for about 100K to buy into GP partnership. And also you mentioned something about 10 term time. So this is actually the period that we would use for question and answer sessions. And I think the two people on the hot seat are Henry and Margaret after their wonderful, passionate talk, you know. So going to Henry first, the GP partnership model is a business, that's what you said. So my question is, do you need a business degree to be a successful GP partner? Please unmute.
No, absolutely. You don't need a business degree. I don't have one. None of my partners have one. Perhaps other members of the panel have business degrees, but you don't. I think to a large extent, having a very good practice manager, or in terms of somebody looking after your finance, that's important. A very good accountant for the practice is also important. But in terms of running the business, the NHS or the CCG are still your primary funder. So the other bits are about how can you find other sources of income and how can you make the best of what you've got. So for example, in terms of other sources of rent from your premises, those sort of bits. So you don't need a business degree. You just have to have a good sense for recognizing opportunities and be determined to take them.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. I'm just going to go through the list of questions that I had submitted earlier on. And someone asked the question, is there a term like salaried GP partner and what does it mean? Henry?
No, I'm not aware of that term. And please, if other GPs on board know, they can add. I'm not aware of that term. But what I know is that different practices, their salaried GPs play different roles. So there are practices where their salaried GPs are trainers, their salaried GP take other roles like being involved in child safeguarding, and those are the bits. There are other places where it's mostly the partners that take this sort of responsibility. But I think it would be very difficult to be a partner and salaried GP at the same time. I really can't see how that works. But like I said, I haven't heard of it before.
Okay, All right. Margaret, you mentioned something about bodying up with other GP partners to go on when you need to go on holiday. The question someone asked was, do you think locums are essential, or can you do without locums as a GP partner?
I've always championed locums. I think locums are an essential part of the workforce because we just simply can't do it all, and you can't. There's always something that will happen that's unpredictable, that you can't plan for, and it's and partnership and the salaried model does not fit everybody either. We've had a number of our partners having to self-isolate for personal reasons during the pandemic, and we've been heavily reliant on locums throughout it, trusted, and actually one, when you value your locums, one of them is actually starting a salary position with us in October. So I don't see how primary care is sustainable without locums at all.
Okay, all right, thank you very much for that answer. I'll just invite Onyinye Okonkwo to ask her question. You raised your hand. Can you go ahead?
I am not asking a question. I'm just going to answer a question. So
okay.
You were asking about salaried partners.
Yes.
Okay, what that model means is unlike the traditional partnership where everybody has a profit share. Some people don't like that uncertainty because the problem with profit share, it has its pros and cons. If it's a good year and you guys make lots of money, you have lots of money to share. If it's a bad year and you guys lose lots of money, you don't have as much money to share. But I have to say that's not very common at the moment. Most partnerships manage to scratch a bit of profit at the end of the year. But what some people don't like is that uncertainty of sometimes more money, sometimes less money. So they agree with the partners a certain amount of money. So they are partners, but they are paid a certain set amount of money every single year. So that negates that whole thing of whether they make profit, whether they lose money, they have their money set. But they still have all the rights and responsibilities of a partner.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that question for us, Onyinye. And if you have any questions from the audience, please raise your hands, and as soon as I see it, I would give you a chance to speak. Another question for Margaret. I mean, do you think you need a certain type of personality to be a successful GP partner, or is it for everybody?
So in our partnership, what we've done is there are different personalities, and not, it's not that we're harmonious all the time. Like I said, it's like a marriage, but with, 19, in my case, 19 different people. There's something that's really good. It's you might know the team roles. It's called the Bell-Bin team roles. So you'll find that there's some people that are termed plants. So they're very good at planting a seed. You've got some people who are good at completing, they're called the completer finisher. So they're very good at taking on a project and finishing it off. So I think it's very important that you recognize your own personal attributes and take that to the table, but it's a team. So you're not alone, unless of course you're going in in a single-handed situation. But as a team, looking at which one of you has specific attributes and where you're going to place those strengths in terms of the services that you're going to deliver. And I think that's really, really important.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. Another question, I'll direct this to Henry. Someone asked, are there advantages to being an equity partner in a federation GP as opposed to being a partner in smaller practices?
Okay, I'm a partner in a small equity practice, so I don't have the experience of being an equity owner in a federated practice. I think the advantage is clearly with there are more of you sharing the risk amongst you in a federated practice. So there's a good chance that should anything go wrong, you've got more resources to be able to withstand the shock. So because in a way, having equity is a form of risk. and you've got to really calculate that well. So I would think that that could be one advantage, in the sense that the chances that your investment is safe or safer as compared to the smaller practice is there. However, it also means your buy-in is higher, because as a federated practice, the chances are you've got more property, unless, well, depending on the ratio of partners, at the end of the day, it might still fall into the same ratio. But I'm looking at the federated practice I know in my area. The buy-in, from what they had a big facility, they had a walk-in center, they had an urgent care center. Buying in that sort of kind of practice was massive, and that was a put-off for quite a number of people. So I think there are pros and cons there.
Okay. All right, thanks for that answer. I think Ada Eze has raised her hands. Do you want to ask a question, or do you have a comment?
No, questions, please. Two questions, one for Margaret and one for Henry. Obviously, me, I'm looking at it from a simpler point of view. Margaret, the first question for you is, I am a young mom with 3 young kids. So it's a direct question. Would you encourage me to go into GP partnership now? 3 young kids, 10, 6, just to give you a rough idea. So there's a juggle of still in, school, preschool, post-school, childminder, like in the middle of it. And then the other question for you, Henry, is this. I know you said you don't need to be, you don't need to go to business school. But, in Nigeria, there's something called business sense. That somebody has the thing for business. Do you need to be the kind of person that, because we've had many instances where people go into GP partnership and then after 2 years they're out. So obviously there's something, if that they didn't understand it, do you really need to be a business kind of person to be able to thrive in the partnership? Looking at it that you said you have to be, this is a business, more business than medical work.
Okay, I'll let Margaret answer first.
Okay, so in typical politician style, I'm not going to give you a direct answer, yes or no. It really does add, and I'm happy to have a conversation outside of this webinar on your personal circumstances. So my parents don't live here, they live down south. So for me, the support mechanisms I have for my children are limited. And they were limited in such a way that I had to set up a separate vehicle, because I really wanted to be a partner and use that vehicle to be able to support my children so I could pursue my career. So it really, everybody has different personal circumstances, and it depends how much as an individual you want to shape and innovate within practices. It may be ready, you may want to do that now, but there's no harm in saying, do you know what, it's something that I aspire to do, and maybe when the children are older, and I've got a bit more time and independence, I can get my head around it. There's lots of different ways you can do it. So there is technically no right or wrong answer. Everything for me, you're asking probably the worst. I'm an optimist, so I would say yes, why not? But I don't want to put people under pressure for you to come back and say, you told me to do this, and now look at me, I'm struggling. So it's really it's a much longer conversation I think we need to have outside, which I'm happy to do. Okay,
thanks for that political answer. I'm sure Ada will contact you and get a more detailed direction based on her circumstances. Henry, can you answer the other question, please?
I think at the very least, you must have interest in being a business owner, and a business sense is a good thing to have with that. The reason why that is important is, like I said at the beginning, it's primarily a business. And at the end of the day, business does require effort. You will need to put quite a bit of effort into it. You need to want to see it grow. You need to, along with your other partners, be visionary. So I think everything you need to start and set up your own individual business, which is what we really call business sense, you will need also in partnership. The good thing here is that you're not alone. There will be more experienced people that you can learn the ropes from, and you would always have that support, even though you also bring your bit to the table. But I think that interest has to be there from the beginning.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I think just a few comments from other people. I think Quincy has a comment. Can I ask you to let us have your comment?
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Just really to try and sort of reassure people in terms of whether you need a business sense to be a GP partner. Not really, because a partnership, you've got people already there. The infrastructure that you need to help you are there. If you have a good accountant, good practice manager, and you have partners who already experienced, you don't need a big business sense. You just need to have common sense and understand, actually, when you get your account and say, actually, last year, we did so well on this side, but this year we didn't do so well. But I want to know why. It's a basic curiosity. We're all doctors anyway. So we ask that question to our patient, to our care. So you apply the same thing to your finances, and it's that level of common sense that you need. There's no rocket science to it. Accountant breaks everything down for you. In fact, when I come to my talk, I will explain this a little bit more. So no, and the thing comes to you on a platter of gold every year. Okay, with regards to knowing how you fit in becomes important, because you need to be able to bring something to the table. So you find your niche, you complement what your other partners are doing, and you look at how you're going to improve your business and make it as lucrative as possible. It's not difficult. And with regards to buying in, the concept, modern partnership now, they don't do buying these days, because what you're buying in is into the property. So you can get a commercial loan personally, or the partnership can, if you convince them to say they can remortgage the property and allocate that loan, that extra mortgage that they took out on that property to you. You've got NHS England that pays the notional rent every year, and that notional rent far more covers whatever is going to cost you to borrow the money. So at the end of the year, you're going to have income by borrowing that money, by buying it. So for me, it makes, and I'll talk about it in my talk. I just wanted to make that comment, that it's actually a lot simpler, much easier to do. Anybody can do it.
Okay, all right then. Thank you very much for that comment, Quincy. I think I'll just take one more question or comment from Ayade.
All right. So my question is for Dr. Margaret. You mentioned about, it was not really a question, just to clarify. You mentioned about a practice where they ended up paying the partner £500 a month. What happened? I mean, how do we avoid falling into such pitfall? Like,
okay. First, I must stress that this was it was a senior GP telling me the story. So it's from about 30 years ago, but he was trying to encourage me when I was looking for partnerships at the time. He stressed the importance of, you must look at the partnership accounts, like Quincy was saying, and at least a minimum of 2 years. Don't be afraid to question the numbers. You know, the problem is in a lot of circles, you'll find that the profit word or the money word is almost like a dirty word, because, you know, how can you be talking about money where, you know, we're supposed to be looking after patients? But you have to remember, as a partner, you're a business owner, you're responsible for staff costs, and you're liable for any of the losses that are incurred as a result of that. So don't be afraid to question the numbers, but it's about making sure that you have a reliable and good accountant to run through the set of accounts, which this particular individual, he was young, and he would admit himself foolish. He didn't look at any figures. He was just offered a partnership, and he took it without looking, and realized that, oh my goodness. I mean, he left very quickly when he discovered what was happening, but yeah, it can happen.
all right.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. There's still so many questions, and we're sort of stretched for time, but I'm just going to ask two quick questions, and I just want really, really short answers. Margaret, during your talk, you mentioned something about term time contracts. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
So very quickly, I think someone's already put something in the chat group. They are very, very rare for partners. I only think I know of one partner. They're more common for salaried employees. Essentially, there's just a contract that you would hold for your salaried staff to just work during term time. But obviously, the remuneration that that individual gets will perhaps not be as much as if they were worked throughout the year. It just offers them a degree of flexibility. But in terms of a term time partner, I know of one, but they are very, very rare. And obviously the profit share would be, there'd be some sort of impact on that, but they're happy to take that impact because they know it's only for a limited amount of time whilst the kids are in school.
Okay, and for Henry, some Kachi asked, is it advisable for a GP partner who has never been a partner to start a GP practice partnership from scratch? That is a brand new surgery that needs to be opened in an estate, for instance. Would you advise him to go ahead and do it? Yes or no?
It's not a yes or no answer. Sorry.
So I thought I'll just try. Yeah.
Is it starting with other people? That's the other question. But as a single-handed GP, that would be no. That would be more straightforward for me. I think there's a difference between going into an established practice where the structure is already there than to start one on your own and alone when you are very inexperienced. So for me, I would say no. But if it's starting with other people, then it would depend on what the other people are bringing to the table.
Yes, starting with other people.
Yes, so absolutely would depend on what they are bringing. They hopefully are already previous partners. They already have some of that experience. So it can be a massive opportunity, although there will be some risk. You will need time to build up your list size. So you've got to think about income whilst you're building your list and all of that. I think it would involve doing your homework well.
Okay. All right. Thanks for answering that. So I think we could go on and on here, but we do have two other speakers, and I think I failed, like I always do during my surgery, in time management. So what I think we should do is just take 30 seconds and just stretch and walk around a bit, and then we'll come back and jump onto the next session. So just 30 seconds, quick stretch for everybody, and drink some water, because especially the speakers, if you've been talking for as long as you have, then you'll be a bit thirsty. Okay. Okay, so maybe I should have given 1 minute, but we're running short of time. So I'll just crack on then. So we are going to move on to our third speaker, Dr. Oge Ilozue, who has been a GP partner for 8 years. She went into GP training straight after FY2 and became a GP partner shortly after completing her training. She merged 2 single-handed GP partnership practices in 2015 and is now a managing partner and GP trainer for a practice of about 8,500 patients. She will talk to us about how to find a good partnership, the do's and don'ts, the red flags, loopholes, and explain what the term last man standing is. So strap your seatbelts and get ready for another interesting and exciting knowledge-filled talk on GP partnership. Dr. Oge, over to you. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I was muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you to Nigerian GPs UK for this very pertinent and relevant topic. So, as said, some of my hats, I'm a GP partner and trainer for my practice. I'm also the co-vice chair for my local LMC committee and the current welfare secretary for MANSAG as well. So for me, partnership, it's been an interesting journey. Maybe I'll just talk a little bit of my journey actually. So 8 years into it, my journey is a bit different from the others. I became a partner straight out from qualification, getting my GP CCT. I became a partner in one practice, but it was a little bit different because my mother was the partner. So she was really keen for her succession planning and for me to join her. So I did that. I also became a salaried doctor in another practice, and I became the succession planner for that doctor who was keen to retire, which he did a few years later. And then I merged the two practices and became the overall partner with another partner for that practice. It's been challenging, but it's been an amazing opportunity to build a culture and ethos that I want, and to put my stamp on it. And yes, it's been an interesting ride. So we're 5 years into the merger. Benefits of partnership. So it's been covered before briefly and by our first speaker, but I really believe in the partnership model. I do think it is the only way that the NHS has been as sustainable as it has been. Obviously, the NHS, we know, has its benefits and its ups and downs, but generally speaking, the NHS is a model that allows you to see everybody, you know, at the point of care. And general practice in particular sees over 90% of patient contacts. As it is, Britain, I don't believe, would be able to spend as little as it does on GP without GP partners. And as much as we hear GP partner numbers are going down, I was recently looking at the recent DDRB pay kind of recommendations to the government. And we're still by far the majority, even though salaried doctors are going up proportionately, quite in significant numbers. So I'd say the main benefits from being a partner, your autonomy. You know, you can build what you want, set your culture, have a say in your patch and in your practice. You can build that team and the culture you want, properly contribute to that in an open and innovative partnership. You develop your leadership and management skills. There's no other way to do it but to do and to get on. And that's one of the ways to learn that. You get established in an area. You get a sense of belonging. You're known and respected by your other GP colleagues, as well as, you know, NHS England, CCG colleagues. You have a stake in an area. You're plugged into information, so information streams. Not saying it's not possible if you're a salaried or a locum, but you are more plugged in and the first port of call usually for information and opportunities. You have the stability of work as well. And it can be flexible. I know people feel that partnership is kind of shackles and chains, but it is what you make of it, and it can be flexible. So the key thing, red flags, pitfalls. This is important, and I'll probably spend a bit of time on this. The red flags to think of is if you have a really poorly constructive partnership agreement in place or none at all. And how do you know that one is poorly constructed? That is a big job if you're considering partnership. My last partnership agreement was 43 pages long with like loads of clauses. I don't have a legal background, you know, so it is really important to do your homework. You don't have to know yourself, but you just get advice and talk to people and make sure you know. Another red flag or pitfall is if the partnership you're considering aren't being transparent about the accounts. And you should have access to things like the last couple of years at least of accounts. I know someone considering a partnership wanted 3 to 5 years of accounts. Open Exeter statements, that's at the moment the forum where we as a GP practice get our income statement telling us what we are earning each month. So to me, that should be something that an incoming partner should be able to have access to. I would say the next red flag or potential pitfall, even though I'm in one myself, are family partnerships. If you're entering a partnership where, you know, the father is a partner, the senior partner, the son is a junior partner, the mother is the practice manager, I'm not saying it's a no-no, but just do your due diligence, because as Margaret alluded to, it is a marriage without the physical side. You are emotionally, you're financially tied in to these other people. So family members, that's a different dynamic completely. We all know, you know? So the liability and the opportunities and the communication will be different. So I would be wary of doing that, even though I'm well aware of the fact that I myself am in a family partnership. I would say red flags and pitfalls, staffing. One of the biggest liabilities of a partnership is potentially redundancy costs or employment tribunal costs. You are liable for that. You employ your practice staff. So you have to understand things about the staff that's employed. I would always recommend having that 6-month neutral assessment period, or being in the practice as a salaried or even a locum, so you really understand how a practice works and staff members before considering a partnership. That's all part of the due diligence. A red flag for me, hidden agendas. And for me, that's something about being really aware of the background, the personality, the situation of the partners you're thinking of joining. So for instance, if there is a partner that's about to retire, what is the plan for that in terms of them going off, doing 24-hour retirement, taking their pension, their work commitments, their profit share? All that has to be ironed out, because historically, senior partners or people with stakes in buildings have had a sense of wanting new partners to buy in. That is getting less common. I'm a relatively new partner, and newer partners coming in, that's a massive barrier. So from people I've talked to that have recently become partners, that's less of an issue. And the parity thing of working up to a 100% profit share is also more historical. It's not done as much, but you need to know the hidden agendas potentially, or the situation of the people you're entering a partnership into, because that can be a massive pitfall. Premises, premises, premises. Again, said it several times, massive pitfall. What is the situation with that? I know of people that have been held to ransom by landlords that retired long ago, that have refused to update the premises, refused to make it CQC compliant, yet you're still paying them the rent each time. The notional rent is provided for by the NHS, but still there's a requirement to update premises, make it fit for purpose. But I know people that have seriously been held for ransom, and an awful situation where the GP partner was actually, the NHS England stopped paying the notional rent on the premises because they were not fit for purpose. Yet the landlord was still, because of the lease and whatever agreement that happened, the landlord was still demanding that rent every month. So it's a completely nightmare situation that you really have to know what it's about. Some premises are owned by the partners or by previous partners. You need to know that. A lot of premises are owned by NHS Property Services now, or by other landlords. So you really need to understand the terms and conditions. And if it's a leased property, you really need to know how long the lease term is, because that can really have an impact. And I can talk a little bit more about that when I go on to last man standing or last partner standing. It's politically correct way of saying it, sorry. Historical liabilities. So yes, if some partnerships have had to take out business loans to maybe update premises, business loans to pay out old landlords. So you need to be aware that these are some of the hidden pitfalls. Are there any historical liabilities in that partnership that you should be really aware of before you enter into that partnership agreement? And one of the biggest causes of partnership disputes and upsets, workload allocation, or the perception that someone's not pulling their weight and all of that. So you really need to set out in the beginning. And that's partly if you know the agenda, if you know your personality, if you know the practice, that workload allocation and distribution, because partnership is, like someone said, is not the 9 to 5 or 8 to 6:30. If you come in with that mindset, you're not ready to be a partner. It is a job that, even though you say it's hours and hours of unpaid work, you have to have that vested interest and buy-in. And you take this as this is your baby and this is your opportunity to build something and make something. So that means that you will be working beyond set salaried, hours as such. You will be working beyond a set day. And there can be flexibility in that. There'll be times you can do more, times you can do less. And with a good partnership, that can work well. But you have to just make sure that workload is evenly distributed, because that can really lead to difficult situations otherwise. A little bit about partnership agreements. So this is a whole hour, 2 hours, day, week workshop. And I'm not the best with this, but I've had to do 2 so far in my short career, relatively short career so far. So they are absolutely vital. It wasn't something that was really in place before, and some places might try and skimp because you feel, oh, I know the people that I'm going into, we trust, we have a gentleman's or gentlewoman's agreement, but you absolutely must have, do not enter a partnership in this day and age without a robust and well-researched, well-written partnership agreement in place. So they're vital. They can be expensive. So the last time I had to do one was 5 years ago, and we were quoted 1,600 plus VAT. So that's, $2,000 plus. And that's 5 years ago, so that'll be more now. But it's an essential investment, and like I said, vital. It's not something you can scrimp on. It needs to clearly set out all obligations, responsibilities, and restrictions of the partners of the practice. It will state your working commitments and your profit share. It will state clearly any capital contributions that are required and over how long. It will ring fence potentially any historic liabilities. Premises are addressed in that. Premises are owned. Do you need to buy in? You know, what happens with the landlord lease? And it should have a clause in terms of general updates to general practice contracts. So as was alluded to before, the biggest upheaval or change to our contract was in 2004. But for instance, last year with April 2019 and the emergence of primary care networks and a national network there, some changes came. So your agreement should have the scope to add those changes as they come in future to it. You can build in some flexibility into it. Maternity leave is a big one. My first partnership agreement, I was naive and young, and they had an awful clause with how I was going to be viable for all locum costs after 2 months or so. So you need to just know what you're entering into and be clear. I think annual leave is worth matching maybe what salaried doctors get to promote whole team cohesion. I know some partners actually take less than their other doctors, some take more. And I just think that doesn't add to a good team ethos, but that's just my personal viewpoint. Every partnership will be maybe different. Study leave. So with a partnership, you have more responsibility. So what skills actually add value to that partnership? So it may be the standard study leave is about a week, but it may be that you want to go off and be a GP trainer, which I did, which is a lot more time. It may be that you want to go and do a musculoskeletal course. You know, maybe you want to go and do the derm diploma. So depending on what value it may add to the partnership, that may be given more time. And as a partner, you're more likely to be granted that perhaps than if you're not. Not necessarily. I think salaried doctors also can definitely negotiate for study leave that adds value to partnerships. Sick leave, consider NHS continuous service. Again, I advise salaried doctors entering into salary contracts, really make sure that's considered. As a partner, that may not be considered because you are independent. People can say what they want, but it's a really big thing to consider because you have been working for the NHS. Those of us that are fully qualified have been working in the NHS system for at least 5 years. So are entitled to the maximum entitlement of sick leave, which is 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay. So it's something to consider. For me, it was really important to put in their sabbatical leave. I've worked abroad as part of my training and pre-GP training. I really wanted to take time out to maybe explore interests abroad, my global health interests, just go away. So for me, building in sabbatical leave, when can you take it? After 5 years, after 2 years? When can you take another one? For how long? What are the payments for that? So for me, that was an important thing to build in. So I've just covered some of partnership agreements, like I said, are long and are detailed. It is important to take time to do it really well. So the last partner standing, or last man standing as it's commonly known about, one partner, so the partner that's left, everyone becomes sick or retires or, you know, disaster happens, someone may die. A 5-partner practice may suddenly find that they're down to 1. So that last partner may find they're bearing all the liabilities and obligations that are owned by the practice if they're not able to find new partners willing to take that on. So liabilities include property matters. There may be a 15-year lease. You may say, I want to hand back my contract tomorrow because I'm tired, I don't want any more. So I want to give my contract back to the CCG and NHS England. But then your landlord says, but you have 15 years left of your lease. So where's my rent, please? So if you're not providing services, you're still potentially liable for that lease. You then need to make all the staff redundant. That's on you as well. So there's lots of things about last partner standing that scares everyone. But you can combat the risk, robust succession planning, address it in your partnership agreement, and people overcome it with networks and mergers. Merging's another good way to overcome that, as Margaret also talked about with her experience. That was all I was going to say. So questions? I know we're running out of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll just clap on behalf of everybody. Really wonderful presentation. I think you, to be honest, answered most of the questions. I was panicking a bit because all the questions I had pointers to high-performing practice. You answered them. Red flags to avoid, You had answered the questions to look for before joining a practice as a partner. Do your homework, look at the accounts for 3 to 5 years, red flags of family partnership, staffing. So thanks very much for that. I'm sure people would still have questions. We'll address those questions after we have the fourth speaker. So my fourth speaker today is no one else but Dr. Quincy Chuka, who has been a GP partner at Halls Lane Medical Practice for 7 years. He has a specialist interest in cardiology and is the Warrington CCG clinical lead for cardiovascular diseases. He is the chair of the Primary Care CIC and the chair of Warrington Diabetes Transformation Group. And I think most of us or lots of us have been waiting for this topic. He has the privilege to talk to us about money, money, money. How to build a successful and viable practice. How much income do practices make? What is QOF? How do you manage your payroll? Amongst other things. But unfortunately, I'm going to really set him a challenge of squeezing all of that into 15 minutes because we're really stretched for time. But so Quincy, you're going to show us your time management skills of how you deal with 10 problems in a 10-minute consultation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harrison. You guys are funny. You looked at the panelists and you thought, I'm going to find the Igbo man to talk about money. That's just not on, okay? That's just not on, okay? I thought about it, but I thought, fair enough, I'm going to do what I've been asked to do, okay?
Sure.
And can you see my screen yet?
Not yet. Can you please share?
I've got to share it. And so, almost there.
Okay. Thank you. We can see it now.
Yeah, so now, as you can see, I've been asked, I'm Quincy Chuka, I'm a GP in Warrington. I wear quite a few hats, like my fellow speakers. And I've been asked to talk about money. So I thought I'll call it money, money. And actually, my son got okay, fine. He got me the soundtrack when he saw the title, so I thought I'm going to play it. Anyway, so I'm going to talk to you about money. Now, this conversation I've wanted us to have for a while. I think if we had a conference, if NGP UK had a conference this year, this would have been one of the topics that we would have covered in terms of partnership income versus locum income. Which one is greater, to really challenge that myth that you earn more as a locum. Because when we look at the NHS England and the politics of it, we Nigerians, blacks, we contribute we don't make up our appropriate quota and to represent and to have a voice in what affects us. So for me, being a partner provides you the opportunity to be able to get into the politics, to be able to change the things that affect us every day. Whether it's BMA, as a GP, we have concern about CSA, all these things. If we're not on the table, like Henry said, then we can't make that change. So this conversation is something that I've been passionate about. And my fellow speakers, they've done a wonderful job in terms of painting the picture of what the GP partnership should be. And my role now is to do two things. Some of them have been covered already, so I'm just gonna skip it. But I want to talk about income as a practice, and then your income as an individual, okay? So whether you should buy in or not has been covered already. Then what does your money mean? And how can you earn money? Now, if you look on this page, you will see that I'll talk about the expenses first. In GP partnership, your staff salary cost is your highest cost. And you pretty much, you can reduce the number of staff you have, but the pay to the pay for your reception team, it's fairly similar, and your practice manager will tell you what is the going rate. Every year, the BMA and some other body negotiate on what pay rise we're going to have each year. And if it's 1% or 2%, that's what pay rise your staff will get every year. And the government will increase your global sum to accommodate for that. Now, the rent you pay for your building is also the next. So I've sort of ordered it in order of what is going to cost you the most. So if you own the building, the rent goes into your property account for the partnership. If someone else owns it, it goes to that person. And the rest of the expenses are pretty box standard, and they are what they are. Now, your role as a partner, like I said before, it's not, you can't really do much about this. What your role will become is at the end of the account, when the accountant gives you your account for the year, they will compare it to what it was last year. And you can look at your expenses and look at where you've gone up, and you want to find out why. If for example, your postage cost has gone up, you want to know, why are you posting so much letter? Can you not use text messaging service like mJob, Accurix? What are you doing? So that's where, so your role as a partner, it's not that much of a work. It's common sense in what you do. I'm going to talk about the income. Global sum, it's the amount of money you get based on the number of patients that you have. If you have, say you have 10,000 patients, it might be, I don't know, 90 pounds, 100 pounds per patient. If you have a more elderly population, that may make that 10,000 patient become 10,500 weighted patient list. So they will pay you based on your weighted patient list. And it's a national agreed sum of money, and that's what you're gonna get. So that's what your global sum is. Then Henry has talked about the local enhanced services in terms of things like, it could be smoking cessation from the council, or public health, or it's something to do with the CCG, where they will ask you to improve care you provide for your diabetic patient. It could be the PCR, the DES, like Oge talked about. So the DES now has teamed up to become the PCN DES. So you're encouraged to work as a cluster of practices, and money will flow, and you all be asked to do things such as provide care for your patients in a care home. So again, it's about the care you provide to your patient. Now, I'm going to talk about QOF briefly. There are two things I want to talk about QOF. In my practice, when I joined, I seem to get the sense that people felt that QOF was more of a tick box exercise for GPs to make money. That was the impression of our practice nurses. And I had to work hard to actually challenge that, because QOF and your performance is about clinical care. If you think about how the QOF point comes about, it's nice team that actually come up with key or KPIs that we need to do, or evidence has shown that if you do that, it improves the outcome for a particular set of patients. So what we're asked to do with QOF is actually to improve outcome for our patient. So it's if you're doing well on your QOF, not by exempting all your patients, that's not what I'm saying. If you do performing well, it's actually higher quality of care for your patients. So when you look at all these three things, the LES, the DES, the QOF, they all about patient care. If you look after your patient very well, have a system and process to do that, and also a system to collect the evidence that you've done that, the money will come. So when you make changes about care that you want to provide. And I'll use my practice as an example, because when I joined as a partner in 2013, about 8 months later, my practice was actually rated one of the worst in Warrington. We are published in Warrington Garden, and I've got that article on the board above my computer in my consulting room. I still have it up to today because it's been the drive, actually. How do we provide a better quality care? And the reason I'm telling you all this, because we are talking about money. And I'll show you, if I take you, this is Fingertips. It's readily available Public Health England things that they publicize based on QOF data. If you look at the Warrington CCG and my practice, and you look at the prevalence for say, I don't know, heart failure, you will find out my practice is actually whole name surgery. We are performing quite well in our prevalence for heart failure. If you look at patient with heart failure and LVSD, and sorry, the thing is not quite as fast as it should be, but we're doing quite well. Now, if you look at patient with atrial fibrillation that are anticoagulated, it's coming, okay? Again, we are top there. Now, you can say we're doing this because I'm a GPSI in cardiology, but not really. And I'll show you another example of what I mean, because we had about 4 or 5 years ago, we realized that the palliative care that we provide for our patient for end of life was not good enough. People were dying, they were not having their DNA out, they were not having anticipatory drugs. So we looked at the whole system and looked at what can we do to improve that. And we redesigned, we mapped the patient journey and looked at what do we need to do, our communication with district nurses, all of that. We put it all in place, look at how we code things. And I was looking at this, I didn't know about this, but let me just show you. If you come here, by the way, this data is available for all GP practice in England. If you want to know about a practice, go and find out. So if you look at palliative care.
Quincy, I think your screen is frozen for some reason. It's
is
not
it?
moving. Yeah, we're just stuck on partnership income and expenses. So
no way.
I'm really sorry. I think it's a technical problem or something.
Is it?
Yeah.
So frozen?
Yep. So what we can see, so what I'll ask you to do is unshare your screen and share it again. Probably that would help.
Well, you can't tell me that all the things I've said that
I do apologize. We were listening to you so much we didn't know that the screen wasn't moving with you.
Is it? Can you see it?
That's better now. Sorry about that, everyone. That was a technical.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So when you look at the palliative care register, we have one of the highest prevalence as well, because we've done something. We've changed the care we provide for patients. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because if I go back to my presentation, you find that actually your prevalence for QOF, if you have a high prevalence, the amount of money you get per point is actually higher. If I take the palliative care for example, the national prevalence is about 0.2%. We are on 1%. So if we were getting prevalence level, we would have been getting about £130 per point. But because we are on 1%, we're getting about £650 per point. So looking after your patient, it's everything to do with it. Les, QOF, DES, it's all about looking after your patient. You do it well, prove that you're doing it, and the money will come, okay? So the other point is what Margaret talked about. Research is a huge potential source of income for your partnership. Trainees, each trainee is about £7,000 to £8,000 per year. So if you have 3 trainees, you're looking at about 24 grand extra income for your partnership. You do minor surgery, that comes with its own income, and you can make as much as you can. Some people make about 30 grand out of it. For Margaret's big 48,000 practice, it will be a good chunk of income, all right? So, and you can develop interest. You can do endoscopy, set up community services. You can do ultrasound scan, echo. all kinds of things, and vasectomy, all can be done in primary care. So source of income is endless. If you work as a team with your partners and you decide, fine, you're going to take this area, I'm going to take that area, and you can improve your income. All right, so
okay.
with regards to the profit share, it's been talked already. I'm not going to go into this much, but what I can say is really for partners, people take between 15 to 22K per session. Okay, compare that to
sorry, Quincy. So I really do apologize, Quincy. Your slides aren't moving. We're stuck on.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I don't know, palliative and supportive care. We haven't. I do apologize, but your slides haven't been moving. So it's.
I'm not sorry about this, everybody. I'm not really sure why this is happening. I don't know.
I think if you move between slides, you have to stop sharing and share the new slide.
Do you have it on the PowerPoint? Just like, do you have the slides on PowerPoint? Because that would have been easier. Or
it is on PowerPoint.
So I don't know why it's stuck. It's stuck on. It seems to get stuck on the screen, and you move on.
Okay.
So
can you see this?
We're seeing the blank screen now.
And that?
We can see that now.
Okay, if Harrison.
Yep.
It's your job to tell me if the screen doesn't work again, okay?
Naturally, I will.
Okay. So basically, when you look at a GP partnership, the amount of money you earn per session is about 15K to 22K per session. Compare that to a salary doctor, you get paid about 10K or 11K plus or minus per session. So if you choose to be a salary doctor, you're missing out on quite a huge chunk of money for doing more or less similar to what a GP partner would do, except the financial and the management bit, which is not that difficult to do. So your income, you have a monthly drawing. At the end of the year, so your drawing will be less than what you're entitled to earn, so that you have a cash flow to run the business. So at the end of the year, accountant does the account. You will see that you might get anything between 15 to 30K back at the end of the year. So depending on how profitable your practice has been for that year. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Buying into building, I'm just going to share a few points. Can you see this now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Buying into building, for me, makes so much sense. You don't get any other investment that will pay you 10 to 13% return. Okay, if you put your money in a bank, you don't get 10 to 13%. Okay, actually at the moment it's about 0.1% or something like, or less than 1%. So you take out the loan. If you take it out as a commercial loan, the interest rate are very small. You're talking about 2%, 2.5%, very small. And you use it to buy into the property. Okay, that's what some partnership make you do. Okay, I have my views on that, which I'll come back to in a second. But even if you take that loan by yourself, that's a good debt to have, because the notional rent that the NHS will pay to your partnership and the income you get from that will cover the loan and still leave you with profit every year. That does not include the equity, because Bank of England, they're printing money like no business, and inflation is going to go up. So the property value is going to go up over time. For that 10, 15, 20 years career as a GP, that property will increase in equity. And so you're getting a passive income. Some people can get 4K to 20K, depending on how big the practice is. As that's extra income that it doesn't cost you anything. Yes, you owe the debt because you've borrowed the money, but it's an investment. So I really think we should look at this in a positive way. And when people talk about last man standing, I'm just going to come back to that, because is it really a bad thing? You own the property. The notional rent covers the mortgage. Why are you worried that you don't own it with somebody else? I just find the whole thing, the whole concept a bit, I don't know, strange. But anyway, big but. Before you jump in and buying, please check the freehold. Is it a freehold? If it's a leasehold, please look at the term. Make sure they're not the rent doesn't double every 10 years. Some of the leasehold is just crazy. Get a legal advice before you buy in. It costs about £100 to £150 to get a legal advice on any of these agreements, on all of that. Pay that is worth the payment. It will save you so much hassle. So you don't need to worry. Just get the legal advice. If the solicitor gets it wrong, you can sue them and you can claim on their malpractice insurance. Anyway, also look at the properties account. Make sure that the practice, they've not borrowed way too much money. There's no equity left in the building. Okay. So coming back to buying into property, what we did with my last partner, because I just when I joined, I was asked to buy. But I thought it was just ridiculous because the property, the partnership, we have a property. All we needed to do was to remortgage it, borrow some more money, and apportion that extra borrowing to that partner. So when the notional rent comes, they will get their share. We will use some of their share to pay off that loan, and they get whatever is left. So why should they go and borrow money? So our last partner didn't borrow a penny to join in, and they went into full parity. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can. Okay.
So this is where the money comes in now. So Oni was saying that in the chat that she was answering, Kachi or somebody, that for a 6-session partner, they take home anything between 120, 140 or 140 on average. So my question is really, as a GP partner, what are your source of income? Secondly, as a locum, do you earn more than a GP partner? And this is really the key question that we need to answer. So if a partner, you're already earning 140K, say a lot of reasonably earning practice will be about 160K, but let's say 140K, okay? And you take into account your annual leave, which is about 7 to 8 weeks. That's another about 20K that a locum will need to work for that 2 months. That's what it would have cost a locum. You take a role you become a clinical director for a PCN. Depending on the size of your PCN, it could be anything 32K or more. And you have a special interest in something or extended role in general practice. That brings you another 14 to, 28K. So when you actually do the math, very quickly, as a partner, you are earning 200K or more very, very easily. Now, most of these roles, they do not involve any clinical work. They're mostly emails and meetings, which you can do quite easily. And all of it, you have your weekends. Sorry, Harrison, it's good. I'm almost there. Just give me a few more minutes. So when you look at this, so you will find out actually that as a partner, it creates opportunity for you to tap into, say if you want to go into Botox and injecting people, that's a huge business in primary care. People are making a lot of money out of it. BMA, LMC, you can be a CQC inspector. You can be the clinical lead for out of hours. There's so much opportunities. 14 Fish, Lantern, all these things are businesses started by GPs in their own practice. The point I'm saying is the world is your oyster. When you talk about raw money, if you look at the locum, say you make as a locum, you make 15K per month. That takes you to about £180,000 a year. And you're gonna have to work pretty most weekends to earn that level of income as a locum. But as a GP partner, you have your weekends to yourself and you can still squeeze all of these roles in that 5 days or even 4 days. Actually, I work 3.5 days because somebody covers one of my sessions. So the point I'm saying is the locum money makes sense. It has a role, don't get me wrong, but as a partner, that's actually where the money is. If you're talking about money, I've stripped away all the wonderful things that Margaret and Oge talked about, because the quality of life, the work-life balance, all those things are crucial. But I've just made it purely about money. So partnership is where the money is at, if that's what you're looking after. And yes, these roles would not happen overnight. It might take you 2 years after being a partner to achieve this, or 3, but it will come. But you can't just turn up at work and feel it's gonna happen. You're gonna have to put yourself out there. You try and develop, go and do a diploma course to a gypsy role. So final thoughts, partnership makes sense for obvious reason. It gives us the platform to get involved, to have a voice on the NHS politics. Looking after your patient, high quality care brings in the money. Local GP has a role. Some family, it will work for them. So you need to figure out how it suits you. If that works for you at this point in your career, there's nothing wrong with that. It has a role, absolutely. But when you talk about the long term, you need to look about partnership. And you can have a portfolio career as a GP. Thank you.
Okay, I'm clapping on behalf of everybody again. So you have about 50 claps, because we have about 50 people on board now. So thank you very much for that. Apart from the technical glitch where we couldn't see your screen moving, but you corrected that. So much information there. Buying into the business, 10 to 13% return of income, equity in the property, and then down to the money talk, very easily making 200K. That sounds very interesting. I'm sure everybody. I'm sure there are lots of questions. I have some questions here. And I can see that my other speakers have been diligently answering some of the questions that have been going on in the chat. But we have two topics, the talk by Oge and the talk by Quincy. So I'll just ask Oge a question here. Does the CCG advertise failing practices that needs taking over? That's for Oge.
So, yeah, so before it was the commissioners, NHS England would put it out to procurement. So there was an online site that you could see things coming up. If you're plugged into local kind of information, we got like information to say that this practice is dispersing the list, or this practice is up for procurement. So if you're interested, apply. So again, it's about being plugged into those sources of information to find out what's happening. With increasing emergence of primary care networks, most practices across England definitely are in a primary care network. So the idea is to do that information finding in your patch. And something we're encouraging with my LMC hat on is to make those relationships with your neighboring practices so you know what's happening. There's still, in my area, there's still quite a few single-handed doctors. So there has to be a plan for that list size, which is in the primary cares network, to keep within that network. It's in their best interest. And so talking to your colleagues and helping them with their succession planning, if they've not thought about it, is something that primary care networks can get more involved in. But if a practice is like someone retires, or CQ's worst case scenario, CQC come in and want to shut a practice down, NHS England traditionally have had caretaker practices that they know are able to, and they've invited them to take it over for a short period of time until that list can be formally procured. Okay.
All right, thank you very much for that. I think Adaize has a question. You have your hands up. A question or comment? Can you share?
Yes, please. I think my question is basically for Oge. So, okay, a bit of Quincy as well. Can I just confirm, so that basically before you go into partnership, you should have your partnership agreement looked into, and that means you need to get a lawyer for that? you should have the accounting part of it looked into. You need to get an accountant for that. And Quincy said having I think the mortgage kind of thing looked into. So are we talking about 3 different people looking into 3 different things before you say yes? Because I don't want to be looking at accountants and then tomorrow I'm going to be like, ooh, I didn't look at the partnership agreement. Is there one body that does that 3, or do you have to look at them 3 different professionals and then you make up your mind? That's one question. And then the succession plan you mentioned, okay, does that also mean you have to make sure that there is a succession plan in the partnership agreement to avoid the whole last man, last partnership business?
Okay, so in terms of 3 different experts, most people tend to have an accountant anyway. So I would recommend not using the practice accountants, getting your own independent advice if you can. But then potentially, if you're going into a partnership, those practice accountants will be, and they should be able to give you advice. But you may want your own independent advice from your own accountant, which you may already have on board anyway. Most people use an accountant, and if you don't, you can do reasonably as an individual. It's not a massive cost as an individual. In terms of partnership agreement, the lawyer that is doing the partnership agreement should be independent. So you can also use them because that's part of the cost of the agreement to do your due diligence and ask your questions. So what usually happens is that a partnership questionnaire comes out, which you would fill in with the other proposed partners. That goes back to the lawyers, and then there's opportunity for back and forth. But you will, it's on you. I would not suggest entry. A partnership shouldn't start before the agreement is signed. So that's potentially the partnership should bear that cost. So if you decide not to enter that partnership, again, that's a discussion you should have with your proposed partners on whether or not you'll be liable to contribute to the cost of that partnership agreement. But if you are, you also can ask that lawyer that's drawing up the agreement information for you as an individual coming into it. Mortgage specialist, yes, you should get mortgage advice, I would thought, but I'm not in that situation, so I'll hand that question over to Quincy.
Okay, so a couple of things. Accountant, if you want to look at a practice account, my first port of call is ask the practice partners that you want to speak to the accountants, and you want to see their last 2-3 years account, so you can see what they're doing. Ask your colleague. We are part of NGP UK. You've got partners here. Ask them, can they have a look? What do they think about the account? Why, so don't pay for another accountant. Just get the practice accountant to have a look and ask your colleague who's been a partner to have a look at the accounts and tell you what they think, because we will tell each other the truth. Simple as that. With regards to the solicitor, you just ask advice about the lease, about the property, and it's simple as that. You just pay them about 100 quid, 150 quid, depending on which solicitor you use. And again, whatever advice they give you, if they get it wrong, you sue them and you get your money back. So, but anyway, that's something else. But with regards to, you don't need to get a mortgage advice at this point because it's not necessary. What you're looking at is the practice viable from the practice account point of view? From the property point of view, is the property viable? Do they have appropriate lease? And take it from there. If you want the solicitor to look, the same solicitor that looked at the lease agreement to look at the partnership agreement, they may look at it, but they may not be an expert. But most partners have a standard BMA type contract, partnership agreement. If they don't have that, then you can get a legal advice as well. But before you go start paying for that, you would have had to make sure that everything else is in place. So that then it's just the partnership agreement that is the issue. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of the succession planning, it's hard because it's very individual and individual practice, individual area specific. But if it depends on the situation of how many partners that are there that you're joining. If you're joining 2 others and one is retirement age, then you would want to ask the question as part of your due diligence of what is the general plan. And You would want to know what's happening, what the thought is about mergers and other practices locally, and what steps already that they have taken. Once you get down to 3 partners, it gets dicey in that way. So you'd want to know that they've already thought about it. You coming on board as a 4th may be part of the succession plan, but you want to know that there's an ongoing plan in place going forward.
Sorry, one other question I wanted to ask all the speakers. Henry, obviously starting from first. If you were to go back, what will you change?
Oge, I went straight into partnership from training. It suits my personality. I kind of think I was a bit lucky because some of the bits that we're talking about, getting a lawyer to look at the agreement and all of that, I didn't do that. So that's what I would change, do my ground checks better. But it ended up working well, and I'm very happy where I am. I couldn't see myself doing anything else.
Margaret?
I think if I was to change anything, I may have just tried to negotiate the parity a bit better, because it was the time where they were under-doctored, and 2 years to parity back then, I could have maybe gone in with full parity. But Onyinye's raised a really valid point on the chat. She's actually said, try not to be too fixated on the money. I mean, I know people who've earned up to 200 grand before tax, but have been in very, very unhappy partnerships. So it really is, you know, it's a bit of a balance between income and are these the kind of people that I think I can work with and be happy with for the next decade plus in my professional career.
Absolutely. I would change the second partnership I entered into, the one I was a salaried for, and I became a partnership there. I would not have done that because the agendas were very different. He wanted to retire and had a lot more experience. I was naive and keen and eager and wanted to make it work, but was in hindsight taken advantage of in a major way. So I would not have entered into that. I would have got proper advice, which is why I'm like, get your advice and do your due diligence. I learned the hard way that can really bite you. So I would change that.
Okay, mine, I did locum for 6 to 8 months after qualification. In terms of, I wanted to know what I wanted what do I want in a partnership? What doesn't work for me? And what, you know, because this is a marriage, you're not going in to come out. It's till death do you do us part kind of thing. That's what it is. I was keen to understand myself as a GP. I was keen to understand what things that I like and things are my strengths and my weaknesses. And so I did it for about 6 to 8 months before joining a partnership. But when I went into the practice to meet the people, because they advertised the job, it was close to my home. I went there, I didn't bring in my CV because I wanted to know what they were like. So I sat in the waiting room with patients for about 20 minutes. Spoke to the patient, found out what the people were like and how the doctors treated them, watched the reception team. Are they miserable? Are they kind to patient? Are they happy? And they were really smiley, happy, and enthusiastic. You know, it was really cool. And when I met the practice manager, the vibe I got was good. Then after the time, I realized actually every Friday, all the partners went to the pub for a meal. And I thought, I like that. That's the kind of place I like to be. Then when I got to know them a bit more, I realized actually at the end of every January, the partners went away with their partners as, you know, from couple weekend away paid by the practice. So for me, those little things mattered. It was the fact that they were not performing so well, I felt I could change. But those soft skills, soft part, you can't change. You know, it doesn't matter how much you earn. If you're miserable, that's the worst you can ever do. So you need to find out your values, what's important to you, and find the practice. So when you inquiring about the practice, find out what they do. Do you like the fact that they work together? Is that what is important to you? So, and one question I tend to ask was quite simple. What have you guys done to change your clinical care as partnership in the last year? What have you done for your patient? For me, that's the biggest thing, because I needed to know that they're willing to change. I needed to know that they adapt and they're flexible, and that if there's something wrong, you can work together to find a solution. And the answers I got was good. Hence, I went back to my car and gave them my CV. That's how I joined them. So that's my story.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to fine Advisable for asking my speakers a general question, and I'm using my power to mute her. She can't ask any more questions for the next 10 minutes, because she took that question from my playbook, and now I'm lost as to what to do next. But anyways, so Ada is on mute and she's in the naughty corner. I think we've gone over time. It's so interesting. I don't know why Ada picked such a juicy topic and selected such fantastic speakers and tried to squeeze all of this in 2 hours. But I have one question for Quincy, because I have a list of questions here which we don't have time to go through. Someone said a question: I am unsure of the financial stability as a partner, considering your extra income is open to losses made by the practice. I mean, you've told us about the sunny side, but it's a partnership. We can never be sure that we're always going to make profit. So how do you balance that? Is that question?
Okay. Can I just say that our income since I joined the partnership hasn't gone, I've not seen it gone down. It may not, because every year you have a global sum increase anyway. But as long as you look at your expenses, you don't just go and employ 100 staff without thinking about it. It's kind of difficult for you to not make money unless you stop looking after your patient. Okay, as long as you're committed to the quality of care you provide, okay, the income will come because you get paid more or less the same with a bit of top up every year. Now, second part, you become creative. You look to become a training practice. You look to become a research center. If you bring in those level of income, there's no way your income is going to go down unless you do something stupid like pay every partner £20,000 every month without, So it's kind of difficult because your income is more or less, what they're going to be. There's a bit about performance and the quality of care you provide. And you just need to manage your expenses. So you can ask your accountant or your practice manager, you can bring quarterly statements to the practice meeting, and you can know where you are and you can track it. So there are no surprises. So these things are there are infrastructures in most practice to manage this. There's one more thing I want to mention. I don't know if you saw in my slide. My practice, we're actually a limited company. And it's important because as a GP partner, the NHS decides what they do with our pension, with our everything. They dictate the role. We just jump how they say jump, we say how high. So, but as a limited company, you control what you do. You control your income, how much you pay into the NHS pension, and how much So you are a lot more in control. If last man's standing, there's a problem, you hand it over to the company and you walk away. Nothing comes to you. Okay, so it gets all this risk that we're talking about. It provides you opportunities, so you can only you draw only what you need to pay into the NHS pension as a person, and you pay corporation tax at a rate of about 18% now, compared to what you pay anyway. So the point I'm saying is, there's opportunity, there's a way to be smart and think, to understand what's at stake and make it work. So when you say about the risk, about not earning any money, I don't know how that's going to happen unless you're not keeping tabs on your expenses. But as long as you keep a tab on your expenses, it's not going to go up all of a sudden.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. I think Ayo had a question, but I think you've answered that already. Or do you want to go ahead, Ayo? Sorry.
Yes. Thank you very much, Harrison. Thank you so much for all the speakers. Just a quick one for the partners that we have. In the world predominantly run by middle-class, middle-aged white people, how have you learned to trust your fellow partners? And have you had to work harder to hold your own and to make an impact and be recognized?
Okay, that is a general question. And I'm going to put Ayo on mute for asking a general question like Adan did.
I'm so sorry.
You know, but to be honest with you, I think it's an important question to ask. It's one of the questions I wanted to ask as a summary of what we have done here. You know, so I would let you answer that question, all of you. But before I do that, I want to ask each and every one of you, as GP partners, just one answer or one word answer. What is the latest time you have left the office as a GP partner? Okay. You unmute, please.
So on the chat bar, there was talk about CQC, but getting ready for CQC inspections. So that was the latest. I think it was 2:45 in the morning before our CQC inspection.
Okay.
That was an extreme example. In terms of getting on with, do you want me to answer the other question now or wait for the others?
No, Karen, we can do it as you go.
I think it's a really pertinent question, especially in light of everything happening. I do think it's really important we're around these tables, but look at yourself in terms of your values, your individual personality. I would not choose to be anything else but a partner, personally. I've not had to get on with white middle-aged men because my partners have been my mother, another Black woman, and an Asian man. And I think that did have problems culturally, and especially he was about to retire and I was newly qualified. So that dynamic was a challenge. So I'd advise people to tread carefully. I do think it's an important consideration to note.
All right, thank you very much. So Margaret, what's the latest time you've left and what challenges have you faced as a Black and ethnic minority partner?
So the latest time I've left is probably 8 o'clock in the evening, and that's because my improving access or extended hours session finished at 8 o'clock, because I just delegate everything to everybody, as if you're all aware now. In terms of trust issues, so my area is predominantly white middle-class men, and it was the white middle-class senior partner that invited me and my family into his home to share dinner at his table, and encouraged me to become a partner. That's what gained my trust, because that's a very rare thing, I think, for some people to do. And even in terms of the college, the Royal College, you'll be aware of all the whole BLM movement now that's going on. We were having a discussion about fellowship, and perhaps this will be another webinar for another day. And someone asked me about fellowship. It was a white middle class man, and I expressed no interest in it. And he asked me why, and I just told him because nobody looks like me. And it's until we can have these bold conversations with these individuals. Sometimes it's their unawareness. Sometimes it is institutionalized racism, but I think we'll just be moving on to such a massive topic that it's getting on to 8:30, and I'm desperate to know the football score. So.
Oh no! Nobody's. I've recorded it. Nobody can mention the score.
Okay. All right, everybody.
Don't see your t-shirt, your jersey again. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. No speaking until asked by the moderator. Henry, what is the latest time you've left the office, and what challenges have you faced as a Black or a Nigerian GP partner?
The latest time I've left the office is around 8 p.m. and that was in my first year. Nowadays, I only would leave around 6:37 if I'm the on-call doctor finishing. So having a laptop at home helps in that sense. My challenge with white middle-class male doctors, I haven't had that experience. My practice, I was lucky that my practice is diverse. 6 of us partners, 3 females who are all British, 3 males, we are from the ethnic minority group, 2 Asians and myself. And in fact, one of the females is also married to Asian. So quite diverse. I've not had that problem, but I've had that problem at other levels. I found it more when interacting with other trainers and at the beginning of my role as a program director. I think the way I've handled it is, 1, to be confident in myself, to know that I didn't get here with anybody just throwing things at me. I worked for it, so I know what I'm doing. And I try to not arrogantly, but I try to assert myself to say that I really know what I'm doing, and I'm not just here because I kind of found a way to be here. But the other thing is just to also just counter some of those reactions, overcome them with niceness, I would say. That's kind of one of the other ways I've dealt with it. But I think most importantly is not letting it knock on my confidence. And if I can have 30 seconds to just add something to Quincy's last question, not all of your income as a partner goes to the practice. It would depend on your kind of arrangement. As a rule, if you're not doing it in practice time, that income comes to you as a person. So it's not going to be mitigated against the partnership loss, as it were. So like the extra CCG role and all of those things, many of those you do in your own time, and that income comes to you as a person. So I just thought I'll add that also.
Okay, fantastic. Quincy, I'm setting a timer for 30 seconds. I want you to answer when was the latest time you left the office and any challenges as a BAME Nigerian partner.
Okay. I finish work about six o'clock. 10 to 6, I'm done. 6, I'm done. Even if I'm on call. But I do I triage referrals for cardiology referrals for 1G CCG and nosebleed. So sometimes I spend extra half an hour. So to do that, but that's my own time. But by that time, I'm done with my surgery work. I'm out of the door by 5:30. Off I go. Because that's the beauty of partner. You arrange your life the way you want. You have that say in what happens. With regards to the extended hours, we do it differently. That even if you're doing a late or extended access or whatever, you finish about 7, half 7. You're done, because we make it telephone triage for the late access, and then finish that early. With regards to challenge as a BME, not really. I think I've been very lucky with my partners. Yes, I'm the only Black person. It's middle-aged white people. I think the newest partner that joined us is Asian, but before that, it was all white. I was the only person. And in Warrington, I think as a GP partner, I'm about 1 or 2 Black people. So what I'm saying is, I've not had much of an experience in that way. But if you're good at what you do, it doesn't really matter. They will embrace you, and you just let it brush off your shoulder. That's all. Get on with it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to have to apologize to Ayede, who has had her hands raised for a while. Can we continue this discussion on Telegram? You know, we've completely run out of time. We've had so much to discuss. There's so much information there. So many questions left unanswered. I personally think that the GP partners that we have in NGP UK should get together and do a handbook of GP partnership made easy, so that it's something that we can pick up there. I mean, there are so many terms thrown around which always got my head in the jumble. DES, CCG, all those acronyms and everything. I think it's something to think on. I have a lot to go and think on, as I think everybody here also has a lot to think on. I think we need to continue this discussion. I think we need to raise awareness about everything for us, especially as Nigerian GPs. We need to raise awareness of the different models. And the key thing is to find out which one works best for us, you know. At this point...
Sorry, Harrison, Mr. Moderator, yep. you know, a fantastic job, okay? Amazing job.
Thank you.
But I need a favor to ask you, okay? I need a favor to ask you.
Yeah.
Ayo has taken up a GP partnership role in February, okay? I wonder if he could share something before we close, because we've all said all these wonderful things and make whatever. He's living proof of it. And I think he got the 20K golden handshake as well, I think. Can you allow him a few minutes to say something, Harrison? I don't know, Mr. Moderator.
I mean, apart from Oge, all the GP partners left the office by 8 o'clock. So I'm wondering how you people did it. We need to do another webinar on time management here, but because I'm failing totally on my responsibility in managing time. Ayo, I agree. It's probably fair to just give you 3 minutes. Okay, I'm setting the timer. Can you come on quickly and share your experience in 3 minutes? Just tell us what you've gone through and how you found it. The floor is yours. You need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thanks for having me on. I'm not sure I have much more to add to such an informative session, but I got involved in a partnership this February. I just completed a mutual assessment period, officially starting as a partner next week. It's been quite an interesting experience, apart from the massive pay drop. But the biggest dynamic I've been trying to deal with is dealing with the dynamics of the relationship with the other doctors in the practice. I think it's going so smoothly so far, and I'm pretty convinced it's a nice experience. Why have I done this? I think, as everyone has mentioned, is all individual personal circumstance as well. I've just had a new child. I felt I needed a bit more security moving forward, and that's led me on to it. But no regrets so far. I can definitely see this definitely going in the right direction.
Oh, thank you very much, and thanks for keeping to the time there. So I just want to invite Benga to, if he's available. If not, I can. He's put a message on here. So Benga, are you in the house? Yes. So Benga is there with his mask. Can you just quickly give us a closing statement as the president of NGP UK? Unmute, please. Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. I've actually been following the presentation. I'm actually on a home visit shift as we speak, but I've told my driver that I would need to have a conversation from. It's been very enlightening, and it's a start of our monthly webinar, really. And we hope to, bring out those talent, those knowledge, the experience we have within NGP UK, and just let everyone learn from it, so that as a body, we can all be more enlightened and get more information about things. So I just want to thank everyone that's come today, the participants and the people that presented as well. Thank you. And thank you, Harry. Thank you, Oge. Thank you, Ada. Thank you, Henry, Quincy, just everybody really and Margaret as well for today's presentation. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Benga. I want to thank Onyinye, who has been very, very active in the chat group, just picking up questions and answering them so clearly, making my job difficult because I don't have questions to ask. But what I'm going to do now is, if I can find the button, I want to unmute everybody and just ask everyone to give a big hand clap for all the speakers for NGP UK General. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm really, really sorry we have gone over the time. We need to do this again. Thank you for showing up. We've had a really great turnout. Please, if you haven't done so already and you have attended the webinar, register so that we can have your email address and send you your certificate of attendance. Otherwise, send a message to Ada or Benga or someone. Thank you very much once again, and have a lovely evening. Thank you very, very much. I'll just play some music while everyone steps out of the seminar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sorry, can we thank you and Adeze? I think people cannot